Jason Bright was not one for social gatherings. As a dedicated analyst, he found comfort in numbers and data, preferring his office's quiet to the chaos of parties. His colleagues often marveled at his ability to immerse himself in work, which served as both a refuge and a prison. His corner office was filled with graphs and models, showcasing his brilliance and offering an escape from his emotional turmoil. Years had passed since Jason attended a social event willingly. The scars of a broken engagement left him wary of romantic entanglements and human relationships. Despite his efforts to remain distant, his friend Brian's persistent invitations to a party began to wear him down. Brian, charismatic and persuasive, believed a night out might help Jason break free from his isolation. The party was bustling. Guests in their 20s and 30s, dressed in casual yet stylish outfits, were playing billiards, watching TV, eating, drinking, dancing, and laughing, fully immersed in the night's enjoyment. In a corner stood a tall, slim man with dark curly hair and an open face, frequently glancing at a notably drunk redhead eager for amusement. He tried to extricate himself from their conversation. "So, this is a date then," he said to the redhead, looking panicked. "Yeah, sure," she replied nonchalantly. "Can we take your car? I probably shouldn't drive," he continued, scanning the room. "Listen, I need to find Jason. Could you text me later?" he asked. The redhead looked surprised. "Jason Bright? He came to the party? I thought he became a monk." "Yeah, I talked him into coming, but now I can't find him," he said. Just then, a pretty blonde woman walked by, and the man jerked toward her. "Hey, Kara!" he called out. The blonde smiled and nodded at his beer. "Did you bring one for me?" she asked. He looked incredulous, then abruptly asked, "Where's Jason? I went to get a beer and lost him." Kara gestured to a room. "He was in the entertainment room about 15 minutes ago," she said. Brian snorted. "You'd like that, wouldn't you, Kara? I just want him to have a good time." He turned back to the redhead. "Text me later. I need to find Jason." She pouted but nodded. "Okay, I'll see you after." Brian pushed through the crowd to the entertainment room where a dozen people lounged watching a music video. He spotted a jolly fat man swaying to the beat. "Hey, have you seen Jason?" Brian asked. "Yeah, he was here a minute ago," the man responded. "Where'd he go?" Brian pressed. "He left suddenly, right out the front door," the man answered. Brian was confused. "Why? What happened?" he asked. "I don't know. We switched to a movie and he just got up and left," the man explained. "What movie?" Brian demanded. "The Graduate. It was at the end, with the wedding scene," the man replied. Brian's face reddened. "You showed a movie where the bride leaves the groom at the altar and Jason watched that? You're an idiot," he fumed. Jason Bright lay on his side, admiring his sleeping bride. Penny Miller breathed quietly, her straw blonde hair gently ruffled with each exhale. To most, Penny was a small, attractive woman, though not classically beautiful. But in the morning sun, her pale skin seemed radiant, making her look like an angel to Jason. Jason had been very successful in life. He excelled in high school sports and academics, graduated with top grades, and earned a double major in finance and statistics before attending Chicago Business School. He landed a job with a top trading firm and steadily rose up the corporate ladder. Yet despite his success, he never felt fulfilled until he met Penny. His past romantic encounters were shallow and unsatisfying. But Penny was different, easygoing, lively, and genuine. Their relationship developed smoothly and strengthened over time. One warm summer evening, Jason proposed to Penny in a park by the lake. She accepted with tears and a smile. In the 8 months since, they planned their wedding, sent invitations, chose dresses, and reserved a church in Penny's hometown for a date just 6 days away. Driving down I-55, they chatted and listened to music, with Penny occasionally texting friends and family about their progress. After a while, Penny grew quiet, gazing wistfully at the passing scenery. Jason broke the silence. "Are you okay, sweetheart? Problems with the caterer?" he asked, looking at her with concern. She looked at him with slight surprise. "Oh, no, I was just thinking about home and the issues I left behind," she replied. Jason frowned. "Issues? What do you mean?" he inquired. Penny sighed. "Some old friends and relatives have certain ideas about who I should be with. They're not very supportive of the wedding," she explained. Jason was puzzled. "I thought your family liked me. We got along great when they visited," he said. Penny shook her head. "My parents love you. It's just some old friends and relatives who think I should be with someone else," she clarified. Jason pressed for more information. "Who do they think you should be with?" he asked. Penny hesitated before responding. "It's about Kenny," she admitted. Jason glanced at her, then back at the road. "But it's been over between you two for years. Why is it an issue now?" he questioned. Penny nodded and sighed. Some friends still see our relationship as a fairy tale and keep pushing me to give Kenny another chance. They say he's changed and that we're meant to be together, she said. Jason, now driving faster, was thoughtful. So, what are you saying? Do I have to compete with your ex a week before our wedding? He asked, his tone tense. Penny, frustrated, pressed her hands to her eyes. No, that's not what I mean, she said, lowering her hands and looking at Jason seriously. Some of my friends, especially Teresa, might try to push us apart or treat you badly. I just wanted you to be prepared, she added. Teresa, isn't she one of your bridesmaids? You asked someone who doesn't support our marriage to be in the wedding? Jason asked, incredulous. Penny frowned. Teresa was my best friend, and I felt obligated. I was in her wedding, and it would be rude not to include her, she explained. Jason turned back to the road to calm down. After a few moments, he sighed and looked at Penny with a reassuring smile. Listen, Penny, I'm committed to us. If people want to complicate things, I can handle it as long as we support each other. I'll be on my best behavior and make sure everyone sees that you made the right choice. Their opinions don't matter. Penny smiled and leaned against Jason's shoulder as he continued driving. As they arrived at Penny's childhood home, a 2-story farmhouse on the outskirts of Centerville, it was almost dusk. They barely made it down the driveway when Penny's mother, an exuberant woman with graying hair, greeted them with delight. Penny, my beautiful bride-to-be, she exclaimed, hugging her daughter tightly, and then turning to Jason. Jason, so happy to see you. You look so handsome. She gave him a brief hug and led them inside. Daddy's waiting and dinner's almost ready. Penny's father, a quiet man, greeted them with a light hug for Penny and a firm handshake for Jason. After some small talk, they sat down to a meal of pork chops, salad, and mashed potatoes. The conversation centered around the wedding, with the women enthusiastically discussing details. When Penny mentioned seating arrangements, Mama Miller's face turned concerned, and she asked, Jason, when is your dad coming? Jason replied, He's flying into St. Louis Thursday afternoon, so he should be here by Thursday night for the rehearsal dinner. Mama Miller's face darkened, and her voice trembled as she said, Oh, Jason, I'm so sorry. There was a mix-up, and the country club won't be open on Thursday. We rescheduled the rehearsal dinner for Wednesday. Jason laughed in relief. That's not a problem. My dad prefers to avoid public gatherings, and he'll be fine on Saturday. Everything will work out, he assured her. Penny's mom sighed in relief, and the tension lifted. Are you sure, Jason? I don't want anyone to feel left out, she asked again. I'm very sure. He'll be fine, Jason said, giving a reassuring smile. But what parties on Thursday are you talking about? I don't remember any party. Well, a bachelor and bachelorette party. Isn't your best man Brian? Didn't he plan something? Mama Miller asked. Yes, I think so. I told him to keep it low-key. Most of my friends won't be here until Saturday, so it's just a small get-together, Jason explained. Jason looked at Penny and her mom. I guess Penny's having a bachelorette party, too? Mom nodded. Yes, Teresa's organizing it. She's really excited. Lots of old high school friends will be there, she said enthusiastically. Jason smiled at Mrs. Miller's enthusiasm, but noticed Penny's uncomfortable expression. Jason felt uneasy as well. At the rehearsal dinner, Jason already felt like leaving. For 2 days, he'd felt like he was on display to Penny's old friends. The main issue was Teresa Southern, a tall, attractive woman who seemed to dominate the conversation, steering wedding plans and social events. She even involved Kenny, Penny's ex-boyfriend, in the festivities. Kenny, a charming country boy, was the center of many stories from Penny's past. Teresa kept bringing up these old memories, which made Jason uncomfortable. One story about Kenny taking Penny to prom in a horse-drawn carriage particularly annoyed him. Penny blushed, Kenny looked delighted, and Jason felt nauseous. The women at the table praised the memory, and Jason felt isolated. He tried to disengage from the conversation, noticing Penny's parents at another table and wishing he'd sat with them. I'm sorry, they may have gotten a little carried away. Jason barely heard the voice over the noise. He turned to see a plump woman with curly brown hair and a crooked smile speaking to him. Huh? What did you say? Jason asked. She nodded toward Teresa. I'm sorry she took over. She knows everyone so well and didn't mean to exclude you. Jason felt the tension ease and smiled. Yeah, I get that. It's just hard when I don't know the stories and my mind's on other things. Like the upcoming wedding? She asked. Jason laughed. Yeah, exactly. I'm Betsy Palmer. I met you at the mall yesterday. Yes, I remember, Jason said. As they talked, Jason heard his name from across the table. He turned to Teresa. "I'm sorry, Teresa, what did you say?" Teresa, slightly annoyed, repeated, "Can you tell us what you do? Penny thought you'd rather explain." Jason, flustered by the attention, began to stammer. "I compile and analyze economic models to help our firm make investment and marketing recommendations." Everyone stared blankly. "Clear as mud," Kenny joked. Jason looked at Penny, who encouraged him to continue. "I evaluate situations to help companies decide on products, stocks, and investments." This elicited nods, but the room grew quiet. Jason felt the need to fill the silence. "So, Kenny, Penny tells me you work at the Ford dealership. Do you like the job?" he asked. Kenny, suspicious, answered slowly, "Yeah, it's a good job. I like it." "So you're in sales?" Jason inquired. Kenny's tone turned harsh. "No, I'm not a salesman. I'm one of the managers," he replied. An awkward silence followed, and Jason felt he'd made a social mistake. "I'm sorry, I didn't mean anything by it," he said apologetically. Kenny muttered, "It's okay." Later, in Penny's bedroom, they recounted the evening. "What was with Kenny's reaction to the car question?" Jason asked. Penny thought for a moment. "Kenny has some baggage. It's not his fault he blew up," she explained. Jason, frustrated, replied, "Are you saying it's my fault? I didn't mean to upset him. I was just making conversation." Penny stroked his cheek. "It's not your fault. Kenny's always been the big man, but things didn't go his way after graduation. He didn't get the scholarship, the job, or the girl he wanted," she said. Jason interrupted sharply. "Or the girl he wanted. Please, don't get mad at my friends." Penny raised her eyebrows. "Like you owe what?" "I don't know. Compete for you or something. It's driving me crazy," Jason admitted. Penny looked incredulous. "You don't have to compete for me. I'm yours. Why do you think that?" Jason hesitated. "When Kenny showed up with that girl, it seemed like he was trying to make you jealous, and it looked like it worked. It seems like he never got over you," he explained. Penny pressed her lips together thoughtfully. "Listen, Jason, Kenny and I were together a long time, from high school, until a couple of years after graduation." Jason nodded. "Yeah, you told me. We planned to get married, but things fell apart. He didn't want a white-collar job or college. I did. We disagreed, and I left for college. He got jealous and started spying on me. It ended when he confronted me at the library. I took off the ring and told him to stay away," she recounted. "Was that it then?" Jason asked. "We talked a bit after that, but it wasn't the same. I moved on, met you, and here we are." She hugged Jason tightly. "Now it's just you and me. Kenny's just an old friend." "Okay, baby, okay," Jason said. He lay awake, staring at the ceiling as Penny fell asleep. John Raymond Bright, stout with a weathered face, sat between his son and Jason's best man, Brian Hewitt, at the only bar in Centerville that served food. Jason recounted the week, including Kenny's outburst at the rehearsal dinner. "What a freak," John said loudly, reaching for his beer. "He sounds like a total freak." Brian laughed and took a bite of his hamburger. Jason shrugged. "Yeah, maybe. But Dad, you didn't miss much." "Yeah, I guess so," John said, finishing his fries. "You'd probably end up embarrassing yourself anyway, so it's okay." Jason started to object, but John raised his hand. "It's okay, Jace. This," he pointed to the bar scene, "is the best I can do." Jason sipped his beer. "Yeah, I'm okay with that too, Dad. Better than last night." John looked at his son. "Is this all you wanted for your bachelor party? A couple of hours in a sports bar with your old man and Brian. No dancing girls?" he asked. Jason shook his head. "No, Dad, it's okay. Even if I wanted that, it's a small town and rumors would spread. I wouldn't want to start my marriage off wrong," he replied. "Yeah, I know." John nodded, taking a bite of his hamburger. "I know," he said. The three men spent another hour talking, joking, drinking beer, and watching the soccer game before deciding to call it a night. In the parking lot, Jason waved goodbye to Brian and got behind the wheel while his father moved to the passenger seat. Both men, lost in their thoughts, drove to John's hotel in silence. After a few minutes, John fidgeted, cleared his throat, and glanced at Jason several times before finally speaking a mile or two before the hotel. "Big day on Saturday, son. You ready?" he asked. Jason glanced at his father briefly before returning his eyes to the road. "I'm ready, Dad. Really ready. I can't wait to get married and start a family," he answered. "You'll be great, son. Much better than I was," John said, his voice tinged with regret. Jason quickly looked at his father. "Dad?" "No, it's true. Your mom and I split when you were 3, and I barely saw you. You had a tough time when you stayed with me after her accident," John continued, his voice breaking. Jason could see his father wiping his eyes. "I'm happy for you, son. Happy you found someone you love." Jason pulled into the hotel parking lot and stopped the car. "Dad, I'm glad you're here too. I couldn't have done it without you," he said sincerely. John turned to his son, tears streaming down his cheeks. "I'm sorry for how things were after your mom died. I could barely take care of myself, let alone you. But I loved having you around, watching you work hard and succeed. You deserve to marry a great girl, and I'm proud of you, son. Damn proud," he said, his voice full of emotion. Jason was crying too. They sat in silence, each resting a hand on the other's shoulder, until John finally left for his motel room. Teresa Jones's parents owned the largest house in Centerville, a Georgian mansion with a dozen young women lounging in the living room that evening. They giggled, told stories, drank wine, and squealed as Penny opened her gifts. Penny, the bride-to-be, was as happy and loud as everyone else. Amidst the gifts and lingerie, a drunken request to model some pieces turned into a shouting match. Blushing and hesitant, Penny tried to refuse, but eventually gave in. She chose the least revealing baby doll outfit, took her time putting it on, and then nervously returned to the hallway. The women welcomed her with loud cheers and applause, reminiscent of a strip club. Though embarrassed, Penny posed for the rowdy group. Most laughed and clapped, but Teresa, tipsy, shouted for more. "Show us another one, Penny! Show us another one!" Not surprisingly, the other women joined in, but Penny stood firm and shook her head, refusing politely. They groaned in disappointment as she retreated to the bedroom. As she entered, there was a knock on the front door, followed by Teresa's laughter and squeals. 3 men arrived with gifts of champagne and vodka. Teresa led them in, where Bill Jenkins and Tom Anders went to chat with their girlfriends. Kenny Bailey, the third man, asked Teresa where Penny was, saying he had a gift for her. Teresa said Penny was changing and would be out soon, so Kenny organized the group to sing the school fight song for her. Penny, thinking the noise was another game, debated modeling more lingerie. Deciding to have fun, she burst into the room giggling, only to see shocked faces. The women pointed frantically at the 3 men. Bill and Tom were stunned, and Kenny grinned and clapped. Embarrassed, Penny ran back to the bedroom, staying there for half an hour until Teresa convinced her to return. By then, only a few girls remained, quietly finishing their wine. Kenny was still there, reclining on the couch. He waved at Penny, and she reluctantly sat beside him, covering her eyes. "That was so humiliating. I can't believe it happened," Penny said, her voice filled with mortification. Kenny laughed and patted her back. "If it's any consolation, I'll never forget it either. I wish I had a camera," he said. Penny glared at him but then laughed and relaxed. "I should have known. Seriously, someone should have warned me," she remarked. Kenny shrugged and laughed. "Surprise is my secret weapon. Look how much I'd miss out on without it," he said. They joked and reminisced until Penny decided to go home. Teresa tried to get up, but Kenny insisted on driving Penny, and she agreed. During the ride, they talked casually about old friends and past events. 2 blocks from Penny's house, Kenny parked near a hedge. "What are we doing here?" Penny asked, suspicious. "I have something for you," Kenny said, pulling out a small wooden box. Penny shook her head. "No, Kenny, I'm getting married in 2 days. This isn't right," she protested. Kenny held out the box. "Open it, please," he urged. Penny carefully opened the box and found an opal pendant on a gold chain. "How? I searched for this for years," she exclaimed. "I drained the pond and found it in the mud 2 years ago," Kenny explained. Penny, trembling, admired the necklace in the dim light. "Why did you wait until now?" she asked, her voice soft and distant. "I hoped we might get back together. But when you got engaged, I knew that wasn't happening, so I wanted to give it to you before the wedding," Kenny said. Penny tried to fasten the chain. "Here, let me help," Kenny said softly, reaching over. "Thank you." She held the pendant. "I love you. I've always loved you," she confessed. "No, you haven't. I'm getting married, Kenny. I can't do this," she said, opening the door and stumbling out, running towards the house. 12 hours later, Penny stood on a stool in her living room, wearing her wedding dress as her mother adjusted it. "You're quiet today. Are you all right?" her mother asked. Penny sighed. "Yes, Mommy, I'm fine," she replied. "You don't seem fine. Is everything okay with Jason?" her mother pressed. Penny looked panicked. "Of course. Why would he be upset? Did he say something?" she asked, alarmed. "No, it's just you seem quiet. Maybe he's upset we made him sleep elsewhere last night. He can sleep here if it's a problem," Mrs. Miller suggested. Penny sighed, rubbing the opal pendant around her neck. "No, Mom, he's fine with it. Jason's a good guy," she said. Mrs. Miller noticed the pendant. "What's that? Did Jason give it to you?" she inquired. Penny hesitated. "Kenny gave it to me. It's the pendant he gave me for my 16th birthday. He found it after I lost it in the pond," she explained. Mrs. Miller stepped back, hands on her hips. "You're accepting gifts from an old boyfriend right before your wedding?" she asked, incredulous. Penny mirrored her mother's stance. "It's different, Mom. He found it and gave it back to me last night." Mrs. Miller frowned. "It's a gift from an old boyfriend who still cares for you. Be careful, Penny. You have a good man you're marrying tomorrow. Don't bring an old flame into your marriage." Penny, annoyed, asked, "Why do you hate Kenny so much? Everyone loves him except you." Mrs. Miller took her hand. "I like Kenny, but I worry he doesn't share your goals. He's charming, but lacks the ambition to build a stable life. I want your happiness. If you wanted to marry Kenny, I'd support you. But I'm glad you have Jason. He's a good man who will take care of you and make you happy," she explained. Penny nodded and shrugged. "I know, Mom. He's a wonderful man, and I love him. It's just, I've always had feelings for Kenny. Being home with him now is freaking me out. It's hard to bury an old relationship," she confessed. Mrs. Miller looked at Penny with sympathy. "I understand, but you need to focus. You're getting married tomorrow to a great guy who deserves the best. Remember that," she advised. Penny nodded, absently touching the pendant. That night, Penny had been lying in bed for over an hour when she heard music. At first it was faint, but then she realized it was coming from outside. She got up and saw 5 musicians playing "I Can't Help Falling in Love with You" on the lawn. Expecting a prank, she laughed and opened the window to chase them away. Then she saw Kenny sitting on the porch roof, humming along with a broad smile. Penny froze, listening in shock, until her father called out, "Penny, what's that noise?" "It's just a prank, Dad. Some guys playing music on the lawn," she replied. "Well, it's past midnight. I'll chase them away," he said. Panicking at the thought of her father seeing Kenny, she told him to hide. Seeing no good place, he spread his arms in confusion. Penny quickly hissed, "Quick, come here." Kenny climbed through the window, smiling. "Hi, Penny. Funny to see you here." Despite trying to stay stern, Penny laughed. "God, Kenny, you're going to get me in so much trouble." Kenny leaned back, smiling. "With an angel face like that, you can get out of any mess." "You're such a bum, Kenny." "Maybe, but I mean it." He noticed the pendant. "You're wearing the opal." Penny looked at it. "Yes, it's a lovely gesture. Thank you." "Is that all we are, friends?" "Because I love you, Penny," Kenny said earnestly. "I love you too," she replied. When Penny awoke, Kenny was snoring softly beside her. Her mother's voice came through the door. "Penny, it's time to get up." Panicking, Penny slapped Kenny awake and covered his mouth, gesturing towards the door. "Penny, did you hear me?" her mother called out. "Yes, Mom, I'll be right out," Penny answered. "Let me put your dress on your bed," Mrs. Miller offered. "Wait, Mom," Penny shouted, wrapping her nightgown around her. "Don't come in. I've got really bad gas." "What? Don't be silly," her mother said, starting to open the door. Penny's heart raced as she desperately tried to think of another excuse. "No, Mom," Penny yelled, slamming her shoulder against the door. "Seriously, it's really bad. I'll go downstairs and put my dress on." During her rambling, Penny glanced at Kenny, who was searching for his pants. She angrily told him to leave, so he jumped out the window, fleeing in his boxers. Penny kept talking about the supposed toxic atmosphere to keep her mother from entering until Kenny was gone. Then she invited her mother in. "Okay, Mom, you can come in, but I warned you," Penny said, opening the door. Penny closed the window and discreetly shoved Kenny's pants under the bed. Her confused mother sniffed the air. "Penny, it smells fine in here," she said, puzzled. Penny smiled nervously. "Really? Must be my wedding nerves." "Yeah, maybe," her mother said, still concerned. Later, Penny sat in her wedding dress, staring out the window. Her mother entered the room with Kenny's jeans and wallet. "Penny, I found these under your bed. Do you want to talk?" she asked gently. Penny burst into tears. "Oh, Mom, what am I going to do?" Her mother took her hands. "Penny, who do you want? That's all that matters." "I feel torn. Everything feels right with Jason, but I can't let go of Kenny," Penny admitted. Mrs. Miller wiped a tear from Penny's cheek. "No matter what, you have my support and love," she said reassuringly. In the groom's room, Jason's excitement turned to concern when he saw Penny's distressed face. "Penny, what's wrong?" He stepped forward, but Penny stopped him with a raised hand. "Jason, we need to talk," she said as her mother led Brian out of the room. "Of course, sweetheart. Tell me what's wrong," Jason said, worried. Penny, with tears in her eyes, spoke quietly. "Jason, I have bad news. I can't marry you. I love you, but I can't do it." Jason tried to reassure her. "If you're getting cold feet, we can wait." Penny shook her head, tears streaming down. "No, Jason. I can't marry you ever. It would be a mistake. I'm so sorry," Jason pleaded. But Penny handed him her ring, sobbing. She then turned and stumbled out of the room, tripping over her dress. John Bright stood in the church foyer when chaos erupted. He saw Penny's mother, looking somber, talking earnestly with Brian Hewitt. Nearby, women eavesdropped, spreading gossip throughout the church. Soon, everyone was buzzing with speculation. Brian's conversation with Mrs. Miller ended unpleasantly, his face red with frustration. As he walked back to the groom's room, John approached him. "Hey, Brian, what's going on?" he asked. Brian shook his head in disgust. "It's off," he said. "Wait, what? That can't be," John replied, following Brian to the room. His doubts vanished when he saw Jason emerge, disheveled and tearful. "Oh my God, son, what happened?" John asked, horrified. Jason could only shake his head, speechless. Kenny Bailey then burst into the church, half-dressed, and asked a woman where Penny was. She pointed to the reception hall, and he hurried there. John, enraged, followed. He found Kenny kneeling before Penny, who was still in her wedding dress, smiling through tears. Overcome with anger, John shouted, "What is this? My son's heart is broken because of this loser?" The crowd turned to John in shock. Penny began to cry, and Kenny rose to confront John. Penny's father quickly intervened. "I'm asking you all, is it true that this... John's words were cut off when Penny's father punched him, causing John to stagger. John wiped the blood from his mouth, his expression brutal. He advanced on Mr. Miller, but Jason's tired, firm voice stopped him. "Dad, no, it's not worth it." John looked at his son, his anger dissolving into calm. Brian led John away, but Jason paused, looking at Penny. He reached into his pocket and tossed the wedding ring toward her. It clinked on the tile floor and landed by her foot. "Goodbye, Penny," he said bitterly, then walked out like a condemned man. Jason sat hunched over in his small apartment, staring blankly out the window. He stood, stretched, and walked past the empty spaces once filled with memories of her. He muttered, 1,000 days, looking at the unmade bed, evidence of another lonely night. He stripped off his workout clothes, showered, shaved, and put on his usual dark suit and tie. 1,000 damn days, he muttered, walking to his car. He remembered the painful walk from the church to the car with the help of his dad and Brian. His dad had driven, trying to comfort him, while Jason was in a near catatonic state. 1,000 days, and this is still the best part of my day, he sighed. He pulled into the Prairie Tower garage and took the elevator to the 42nd floor. In his corner office, he greeted the janitors and sat at his desk, turning on his computer. This office was his refuge, where the numbers, graphs, and models occupied his mind and pushed away memories of betrayal and heartbreak. At his friend's urging, he had gone on 5 awkward dates, none of which led to anything. He concluded he wasn't ready to socialize or date and retreated to his office, avoiding human interaction. But he realized he couldn't live as a high-tech hermit forever. That night, instead of going home, he decided to attend a party Brian had urged him to go to. The house was large, almost a mansion, with cars filling the driveway and street. Jason parked a block away and texted Brian, who quickly met him at the door. Brian, smiling and nervous, guided Jason inside to prevent him from leaving. The house was crowded with people laughing, watching a baseball game, playing volleyball, eating barbecue, and drinking beer. Brian introduced Jason to old friends and new acquaintances. To Jason's surprise, he enjoyed himself and felt confident talking to women. Jason and Brian played a game of pool in the recreation room. When Brian left to get a beer, Jason wandered the house and ended up in the media room, where he ran into Buddy Johnson, a former classmate. Buddy smiled and greeted him. "Hey, Jason, long time no see. Want some chips? There's barbecue outside, too." "No, I'm fine," Jason replied, nodding at the TV. "What are you watching?" "We just watched the Cubs lose in extra innings," Buddy said, rolling his eyes. "Now it's a movie. When it's over, we'll hook up the Xbox to play. It should be done soon if you want to join." Jason nodded at Buddy's words and stood behind the crowded couch. As the movie resumed, Jason recognized The Graduate and grew uneasy. Watching the final scenes where Benjamin Braddock disrupts Elaine's wedding and they run away together, he became pale and breathless. The audience, sprawled on the floor and couch, laughed and shouted, "Elaine!" along with the scene. Jason, feeling nauseous, bent over with his hands in his lap. A concerned woman gently asked if he was okay. Embarrassed, he shook his head and left without a word. Brian nervously knocked on Jason's apartment door, waiting a minute before knocking louder. Jason, looking tired and disheveled, answered in shorts and an old t-shirt. "Hi, Brian. What do you need?" he asked, inviting him in and heading to the living room. Brian hesitated but followed. "Hey man, sorry to barge in, but I wanted to check on you after the party last week. I'm sorry about the movie thing," he said, trying to sound sincere. "You didn't need to apologize. It wasn't your fault," Jason replied, his tone indifferent. "I was worried about you. I wanted to talk," Brian continued, his concern evident. "Talk about what?" Jason asked tiredly, sinking onto the couch. Brian sat on the edge of the couch. "You need to move forward, Jace. You've had a rough patch, but you need to live your life," he urged gently. Jason's frustration boiled over. "Easy to say. I was betrayed by the person I trusted most. How do you move on from that? Do you have any idea what that feels like?" he snapped, his anger palpable. Brian raised his hands to calm Jason. "You're right. I've never gone through something like that. But as a friend who cares, I'm saying you can get over it, but it will take effort and courage," he said, his voice calm and steady. Jason snorted. "So I'm a coward because I got dumped?" he retorted, his sarcasm cutting. Brian shook his head. "No, I'm saying your life is up to you. You can stay isolated, or you can try to start something new," he replied, his tone firm yet supportive. Jason, frustrated and angry, tried to respond but collapsed back onto the couch. "I don't even know how to start," he admitted, his voice tinged with defeat. Brian smirked and pulled a folded piece of paper from his pocket. "Well, I might have the answer," he said, handing the paper to Jason, who read it suspiciously. "It's a list of girls who would love to go out with you. Just call." "I've done that before. It didn't work out," Jason responded, his doubt evident. "Then it's time to do better," Brian said, his tone encouraging. "I don't think I can," Jason murmured, his resolve wavering. "That's what I thought you'd say," Brian said, pulling out his cell phone and scrolling through several screens. "Here, I was told to read this to you if you resisted, so listen." He pressed a button, and John Bright's voice filled the room. "Jason, I know you've been through hell with all that marriage crap. I understand why you're disillusioned with life and women, but it's time to grab life by the balls and start living again. I've seen you do amazing things, and now I'm asking you to do another. Put this behind you and start having fun. Brian has a list of girls he assures me are great. You don't need anything serious, just enjoy yourself. You have too much ahead of you to live in a self-imposed prison." Jason sat on the couch, rocking slowly and staring at the list on the coffee table. "Well?" asked Brian after a few minutes of silence. "What?" Jason blinked, snapping out of his daze. Brian sighed. "You need to get your act together. Ask one of these girls out and start living." Jason nodded. "Yeah," he interrupted. Brian, surprised, asked, "Wait, did you say you're going to ask some of these girls out?" "Yeah, that's what I said," Jason replied more confidently. "My dad's right, you're right. I need to move forward." Brian smiled, nodding. "All right then." Without a clear decision, Jason started at the top of the list. The first woman was a tall, graceful former ballerina with straight brown hair who worked as a buyer at a clothing store and loved tennis. They had dinner at an Italian restaurant and saw a play. The evening was polite but awkward, ending with a dry kiss on the cheek and an apology. Jason spent the night tossing and turning, but the next morning he called the second girl. She was a short, perky redhead who worked at a veterinary clinic, loved to dance and skate. They went to a sandwich shop, a dance club, and ended with coffee at a diner. The conversation flowed easily, covering various topics except their personal romantic stories, likely an explicit directive from Brian. Over the next 2 months, they went out 4 more times, but there was no real spark, so he let the relationship fade. Girl number 3 was a free spirit with light brown hair, laughing brown eyes, and tanned skin. She worked as a research assistant at Northwestern University and loved motorcycles, loud music, and smoking pot. They went to a rock concert, and afterwards, she invited him inside. The apartment smelled of smoke and played Grateful Dead music. Jason tried to act casual, but eventually left. Back at his apartment, he quickly washed his clothes and showered, wondering if he could test positive for secondhand smoke. The next day, Jason called girl number 4. She resembled Marilyn Monroe with short platinum blonde hair. She worked as a saleswoman, lived at home, and didn't have many interests. Jason, regaining his social skills, managed to carry on a conversation during their tedious dinner. She invited him in for a drink, but he politely declined, unable to connect with her. He ended the evening alone. Girls 5 through 7 were fun but unremarkable. They had good conversations and easy closeness, leading to second, third, and fourth dates, but Jason never felt a deep connection. He worried that the love he had with Penny was gone forever. Then he met girl number 8, Gail Ann Rawson, a 28-year-old University of Illinois graduate with a marketing degree, worked in advertising. She was pretty with shoulder-length ash blonde hair and a heart-shaped face. Her brother, who worked with Brian, recommended her. Initially hesitant, she declined Jason's call, but after reconsidering, she agreed to a date. They met at a small downtown cafe. The conversation was awkward at first, but became lighter and more spontaneous. They shared stories and laughed. Jason lost track of time, realizing he was late returning to the office. He paid, hailed a cab for Gail, and rushed back to work, deciding to wait a couple of days before contacting her again. However, by late afternoon, he decided to call her for dinner the next night. They dined at an upscale steakhouse, planning to see a movie, but missed it due to their engaging conversation. They lingered over dessert and chatted until the waiter asked them to leave. Instead of ending the evening, they went to a nearby bar and continued talking. Their conversation covered everything from clothing preferences to sports teams to travel dreams. They discussed serious topics and joked about humorous ones. One day, they talked about the lifestyles of the rich and famous. Jason mentioned Lindsay Lohan, and Gail reacted strongly. "God, Lindsay Lohan, how much I hate her," Gail exclaimed with obvious disdain. Jason, puzzled, asked, "Why does she annoy you so much? I know she's out of control, but what makes her different?" Gail sighed and explained, "It's not about her behavior. I just hate a Disney movie she was in, and I irrationally blame her for it." "Wait, you hate her because of a movie?" Jason inquired, clearly baffled. Gail squinted, clearly irritated by the topic. "No, well, sort of. I mean, I really hated that movie," she admitted. Jason tilted his head, thinking. "Seriously, you owe me an explanation. How can a Disney movie be that bad?" he pressed. Gail sighed and leaned forward, resting her cheek on her hand. "You're going to make me talk about it, aren't you?" she smiled. "Yes," Jason replied with a half smile. "Okay, the movie is a remake of The Parent Trap. The original had Hayley Mills. You know the story?" Gail began. "Yeah, twin girls try to get their parents back together," Jason confirmed. "Right, and they did horrible things to the woman their dad was going to marry," Gail continued. Jason raised his eyebrows as Gail leaned back, chewing her lip. "Everyone liked that movie because they wanted the parents to reunite, but I relate to the woman. She just loved a guy and wanted to marry him, but those girls played awful tricks to separate her from their dad. I know the movie paints her as a gold digger, but she wasn't," Gail explained, her frustration evident. "Why do you care so much?" Jason asked, genuinely curious. "You really don't know, do you?" Gail responded, her voice softening. Jason shook his head, puzzled. "No, I have no idea," he admitted. Gail sighed, rubbing her scalp. "I thought you knew my story. Maybe Brian or my brother told you," she said. "Honestly, Gail, I have no clue," Jason replied sincerely. "Well, you know about Trevor, right?" "I've mentioned him," Gail prompted. "Of course," Jason nodded. "Things were pretty serious between you two," he acknowledged. "Yes. He was older, in his late 40s, an architect, and divorced. We talked about marriage, but he had a daughter, Amy. She was 14 and wanted her parents to get back together. The divorce was hard on her, so when Trevor and I got serious, she tried to sabotage our relationship," Gail recounted. Gail took a sip of her drink. "She pulled a parent trap on me. Pranks to make me look bad," she said, a hint of bitterness in her voice. Jason looked at Gail expectantly. "Now you have to tell me about the pranks," he urged. Gail laughed and shook her head. "Okay, buckle up," she said, preparing to continue. She took a deep breath. "The first prank was when I was meeting his business associates. Amy gave me my perfume as we were leaving, but she had added something horrible to it. I didn't realize until Trevor smelled my neck and almost gagged. I had to clean up in the restroom, but I still stunk. It was humiliating," Gail revealed. Jason suppressed a laugh. "That's awful," he said, trying to sound sympathetic. "Yeah, just feel sympathy," she said sarcastically. "Then she washed my underwear in the same stuff, put garlic capsules in my vitamins, and spiked my spritzer. I told Trevor, but he stayed silent. I wondered if he thought I just smelled bad," she continued, her frustration growing. Jason leaned forward, sniffing. "Well, I'm not smelling anything now," he joked. Gail fake frowned, then continued her story. Another time, she smeared fly pheromone on me before a picnic with our friends. Within minutes, I was swarmed by flies. I was furious and asked Trevor to talk to Amy, but he just let it go. That incident ruined our relationship, Gail recounted, her voice laced with frustration. Jason, wide-eyed, responded, almost, but not quite. It stressed me out, made me paranoid, and I couldn't trust Amy. The final straw was at a dinner party with his parents and clients. Amy slipped a sedative, maybe Ativan, into my wine. By the end of dinner, I was slurring my words and passed out in my food. Amy managed to make it look like I peed my pants. Trevor and another guy had to carry me to the bedroom. "You're kidding me," Jason said incredulously. "No, it's true. Trevor was embarrassed by my behavior and got upset when I blamed Amy. We fought, and the lack of support ended our relationship," Gail explained. Gail laughed. "Straight out of Disney, huh?" she quipped. "More like Twisted Disney," Jason retorted. "That's my sad story," Gail said, scrutinizing Jason with a curious smile. "How about yours?" Jason leaned back. "Mine's more like Runaway Bride," he began. Gail, intrigued, asked, "Did she chicken out at the last minute?" "No, she left me for an old flame at the wedding. I was in my tux ready to go, and she walked in, said it was over, and left," Jason shared, his voice tinged with lingering hurt. "God, that's awful," Gail sympathized. "Yeah, it was. My dad almost caused a ruckus at the church, called her a witch and yelled at the guests. It was chaos," Jason continued, shaking his head at the memory. "And what did you do?" Gail asked softly. "I just walked away like a zombie. I was a mess. This is the first time I've laughed about it. It seems so far away now," Jason admitted. "Time does that," Gail mused. "Time helps, but mostly it's because of you," Jason said warmly. They walked out of the bar, holding hands, and Jason helped Gail into his car. He nervously said, "I had a great time tonight. Maybe you'd like to spend more time together. We could go to my place. It's nearby." Gail stared out the window, and Jason quickly apologized. "I'm sorry, I didn't mean to embarrass you. We haven't known each other long," he said, feeling awkward. Gail turned to him. "Yes, I'd like to go to your apartment," she said decisively. 15 minutes later, Jason opened his apartment door for Gail. "There it is," he said, wishing he'd said something wittier. Gail entered slowly, and Jason took her coat. "Come in and sit on the couch if you'd like. The kitchen is there, and the bathroom is down the hall," Jason offered, trying to sound casual. Gail looked around the apartment, then back at Jason with a tense expression. "Jason," she said softly, "just take me to the bedroom." Jason swallowed hard and nodded. Later that night, he woke up and realized he wasn't alone. He saw Gail's smiling face in the dim light. "Hi," she said softly. "Hi yourself. Can't sleep?" Jason asked. "No, I woke up a while ago and was just thinking," Gail replied. "About what?" Jason inquired. "I'm not sure I should say. A girl shouldn't always reveal her plans," Gail teased. "Plans? What plans?" Jason asked, intrigued. "I'm going to make you mine," Gail declared, her eyes sparkling. Jason froze, eyebrows raised in surprise. Gail waited cheerfully for his response. "You've made a good start," he finally said quietly, looking into her eyes. Their romance blossomed into a sensational affair, full of exciting new experiences. They quickly got engaged, planning a perfect wedding without any issues or resentment. Jason's worries seemed to disappear. Everything was perfect until Gail casually mentioned that Trevor wanted to attend the wedding and some pre-wedding events. She encouraged his attendance, which made Jason uneasy. He tried to stay calm, thinking Gail was just being polite. However, when Trevor arrived, it was clear he still had feelings for Gail. He frequently pulled her aside for private conversations, touched her, and acted as if they were still a couple. Gail never firmly told him to back off. Less than 10 months after meeting Gail, Jason found himself at another wedding rehearsal dinner, feeling a sense of impending doom. Trevor, charming and confident, captivated the guests, especially Gail, who couldn't take her eyes off him. Jason felt increasingly anxious and isolated, barely touching his food and struggling to engage in conversation. Finally, he muttered to himself and rubbed his temples in frustration. Gail noticed. "Are you okay? You look upset." Jason glared at her and leaned in to hiss angrily. "Damn it, Gail! If you're going to take me down, why don't you just use a knife?" Gail's eyes widened in shock. "What? What's wrong, Jason?" Jason smirked. "Come on, Gail, I've been here before. You invited your ex to our rehearsal without asking me. You have secrets, private conversations, and you can't stop looking at him. I know how this ends. Maybe we should switch places." Gail shook her head vigorously, leaning closer to Jason. No, Jason, I didn't invite him. He invited himself. He said he wanted to see me, and I didn't tell you because I knew you'd be mad. Mad about what? A last-minute tryst? Why wouldn't I be upset about my fiancée's plans with her ex before our wedding? Jason demanded. No, Jason, no, just stop, Gail replied firmly, her voice becoming resolute as the panic faded away. This isn't what you think, she continued. Jason raised his eyebrows, waiting for her explanation. Gail took a deliberate breath before continuing. Look, if you wait a minute, just a couple of minutes, you'll see. At that moment, one of the women Trevor had been chatting with loudly asked, What's that on your teeth? Some kind of juice? Gail smiled broadly at Jason. Or maybe you won't have to wait at all, she said. Jason turned around, looking annoyed at the new commotion. Trevor was still smiling, but now had dark blue teeth and lips, with a drip mark on his chin. He brought his hand to his mouth, looking puzzled and concerned. What the hell is that? Jason exclaimed, his eyes wide. What did you do? We're not done yet, Gail replied nonchalantly, turning to look at the scene unfolding. Jason watched as Trevor tried to clean himself with a napkin dipped in water, only to spread the blue dye further. His expression turned from annoyance to frustration, then to panic as he realized he was stuck to the chair. Trevor began sawing at his pants with a knife to free himself, while the onlookers' polite exclamations turned to laughter. He finally stood up with a tearing sound and rushed to the restroom, his appearance now that of a corporate clown. Oh my God, that's cruel. And incredibly funny, Jason said, turning to Gail, who was watching with smug amusement. Yes, it was, she replied nonchalantly. Especially the last part. I didn't expect that. Jason leaned in, whispering conspiratorially. What do you mean you didn't expect it? Didn't you plan this? It wasn't just me. I had a partner in crime, Gail explained. Partner? Jason asked. Yes, I needed help and I found the perfect person. A grown man with the heart of a 12-year-old boy, Gail replied, nodding toward the end of the table, where Jason saw his father grinning widely. He raised his wine glass in a toast. Oh my God, Jason laughed. What have I gotten myself into? I don't know, Gail replied, wrapping her arm around his. What did you get yourself into? Heaven, I guess, Jason concluded. Penny parked the pickup under a shady tree, wiped sweat from her forehead, and cursed the broken air conditioner before getting out. She walked up the driveway to the duplex, passing a tiny lawn with brown grass and a broken sprinkler. She unlocked the screen door and stepped into the living room, where a fan was blowing air on her sleeping husband. She slammed the door shut, waking Kenny. Hey, babe, Kenny said, rubbing his uncombed hair. What time is it? Penny surveyed the cluttered living room. Empty pizza box, uneaten cereal, video game console, socks, and papers. The TV was on, with a video game intro playing, and country music was on the radio. It's 4:30, Kenny, she replied, leaning over the fan. Did you interview for any jobs today? Kenny sat up, stretching lazily. How was I supposed to go to interviews when you have the truck? Penny stood with her hands on her hips, raising an eyebrow. You could have looked online, filled out forms, made some calls. It's been 7 months and we're out of money. Have you done anything? Kenny sighed. Yeah, I checked online, but there was nothing but crap. Maybe working a crappy job for a while won't liquidate you, Penny suggested. Maybe not being a nagging witch won't liquidate you either, Kenny retorted. Penny's face darkened and she covered her mouth, blinking rapidly. Kenny's expression softened. He stood up, hugged her, and whispered, I'm sorry, Penny. I didn't mean it. I just don't want to settle for a job that doesn't pay enough. He pulled back and looked into her eyes. Just stick with me. There's a new dealership opening on the west side and I'm eyeing a spot there. We'll be fine. Just give me some space and time. Penny sighed and nodded. Okay, Kenny. I'm just stressed. My accounting job barely pays and we have no savings. We need a second income. I know, Pen. I'll get it soon. Don't worry. They exchanged half smiles and walked to a small alcove with a desk and computer. Penny sat down, turned on the computer, and started paying bills. After a few minutes, she checked the browsing history and saw only one job search among sports pages and YouTube videos. She glanced at Kenny, who was pulling a slice of pizza from the coffee table. Want some? He offered. She shook her head. No, I'm going out with the girls tonight, remember? Oh yeah, he nodded and chewed. Don't spend too much money. I won't, Penny assured him. She gave him a warm smile and he grinned back before returning to his pizza. She watched him for a moment, seeing him as a boy in a man's body. She reached for a wooden box on the shelf and pulled out an opal pendant, watching him with a dreamy expression. The smile vanished when she heard swearing and saw Kenny struggling with the video game controller. She frowned, bit her lip, and looked back at the box. Slowly, she lifted a piece of felt-covered cardboard and pulled out a beautiful gold ring with a diamond. She admired it secretly, then returned to the computer. She brought up images she had saved over a decade, photos of Jason. Jason with businessmen on his honeymoon in Hawaii and with his perfect family in front of their beautiful home. The phone rang, snapping Penny out of her thoughts. She answered and heard Betsy Palmer's cheerful voice. "Hi, how's the birthday girl? Ready for the bachelorette party?" Betsy asked. Penny hesitated. "Yeah, Betsy, I don't know. Our budget is tight and—" "Oh, no excuses. It's your birthday present from all of us. You're not paying a dime. The whole gang will be there, except Teresa." "Why can't Teresa come?" Penny inquired. "She got a second job because Tim's back in rehab. She can't make it," Betsy explained. "Oh, I had no idea," Penny said softly. "Yeah, it sucks. But tonight we'll have a blast. Don't be late or we'll miss the start of the show," Betsy warned. "The show?" Penny asked, confused. "Yeah, we're seeing a romantic comedy with Jennifer Lawrence. It starts at 7 o'clock, so we need time to eat," Betsy replied enthusiastically. Penny bit her lip. "Is that the only option?" "There's a Tarantino Western, but that's about it," Betsy mentioned, her tone clearly disapproving of the Western. Penny snorted. "I think maybe I should watch a Western." Betsy chuckled. "Really? I didn't know you liked Westerns." Penny looked at Kenny, absorbed in his video game amidst the mess, then at the image of Jason and his perfect family. Her voice was tinged with melancholy and regret. "Betsy, it's not that I like Westerns. It's that I really, really hate romantic comedies."